We're going to start chapter 22. We're still in the law of Moses and the law that Moses has received. One of the things that we're going to find is when we go through this, we still got chapter 23 and chapter 24 to go. So we want to get to chapter 25 because that's where it's going to start talking about the offering for the making of the tabernacle. So we still got a lot of laws to go through. One of the things I think you're going to notice in this presentation this morning that's going to kind of change up a little bit in the format I'm using. About halfway through it, I'm still using some long statements and stuff like that, but we've got to get through it. So I shifted gears a little bit and went more to bullet type statements, okay? And I changed up the approach that we're going to be using because if we're not careful, we'll still be here in chapter 22, 23, and 24 next year this time, okay? So Daniel didn't know that we were going to get into Moses' law library, right? Okay? And if you've ever been in an attorney's office, you know the library part of it can be quite extensive, you know? Walls all around, books just full of law books and things of that nature. And that's kind of what we kind of got into here with it. So I'm going to back out a little bit, but I don't want to leave any information out. I think it's good to cover because it helps us paint a picture of things later on that they're going to talk about more and more in other books. So this morning, as I said, Exodus chapter 22 and the conversations that's going on within this chapter has just a very brief overview. Is verses 1 through 4 is about the law and stealing. Verses 5 through 8, the law and responsibility. Verses 9 through 15, ownership and borrowing. Verses 16 through 17, the law and virginity, or a dowry paid to a virgin. Exodus 18 through 20, sorcery, bestiality, idolatry. 21 through 24, compassion for the stranger and the disadvantaged. Verses 25 through 27, compassion for the poor. And we'll finish out verses 28 through verse 31 about what God expects of His first fruits. Okay? So this morning we begin, as I said, verses 1 through 4. And we're going to read verses 1 through 4. And so it says, if a man steal an ox or a sheep and kill it or sell it, he shall restore 5 oxen and 4 sheep for sheep. If a thief be found breaking up and be smitten that he die, there shall be no blood shed for him. If the sun be risen upon him, there shall be blood shed for him, for he shall make full restitution. If he have nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. If the thief be certainly found in his hand alive, whether it be ox or ass or sheep, he shall restore double. So what we're seeing here is God's directive given to Moses to be given to the judges at how they're to handle the theft of sheep and oxen and things of that nature. One of the things you keep noticing about this is a lot of restitution verses that we've seen so far in the previous chapter, and that thought continues on. But one of the things that you'll notice here, if a thief be caught breaking at night and the owner of the home or the owner of the cattle takes his life, then hey, he's just dead, okay? There won't be any requirement of that. But if it be daylight, then that changes the scenario significantly because you can see what's going on and see what's happening, okay? And so we find that these things were given to try to have a fair and balanced law. Also we find here about the amount to be restored is specified. And so we find that these things are given as a part of the law of Moses. And one of the things I'm going to have to do, hang on just a minute, let me get it situated. I'm going to have to step over here a little bit because this is not showing up like a woman. If a man steal an ox or a sheep, the command against theft was already stated in the Ten Commandments, you know, Exodus 20 and verse 15. Here are more specific principles given to judges so they could apply that principle in the daily life and administration of justice among the people of Israel. So that gives us some kind of an overview thought of what this is about. In these passages, the penalty could be anywhere from 500%, he shall restore 5 oxen for an ox, to 200%, he shall restore double. The reason for the fivefold penalty in the case of stealing an ox is probably because one man stole the means of another man's livelihood. Remember, oxen were very important in their livelihood, one for agricultural, right? That's mostly what they plowed with. And another reason for it is, a lot of times the oxen's flesh, was used for food, the hide used for different things and things like that. So it carried a greater penalty than some of the others. We also find that that principle would extend to taking of any of the man's plowing or cultivating instruments. So it's really interesting at how God set this up to regulate restitution and theft. Okay? One of the things too we find in this, if the thief is found breaking in and he is struck so that he dies, there should be no guilt for his bloodshed. It's kind of like the laws today, very similar in nature. When you go to breaking and entering into a man's home or into his barn to steal his property and stuff, and something happens and you wind up on the dead side of the coin, there's not going to be blood shed for blood. There's no restitution made for that, okay? A property owner had the right to protect his property with force, but only with reasonable force. The assumption was that if it was daylight, the property owner had the ability to defend himself short of lethal force. So you have to look at the situation going on. Okay, now this was given in generality for the judges to apply. We know that all cases and situations are not the same. So you have to look at the application of it that's going on. He should make full restitution. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. If the person was unable to pay back what the thief stole, the thief was sold as an indentured laborer with the money from the sale going to the victim. So, and we talked about that a few chapters ago about indentured servants and how you could wind up being an indentured servant. One is like this, for theft, you didn't have the money, you could be sold as an indentured servant, and the sale would go to the victim. And we know there were great laws and rules regulating slavery or servitude. Slavery, as used in the KJV, does not mean the ball and chain type slavery that we're familiar with. I think we spent a lot of time on that because there's a lot of big misconceptions about that. The slavery that talks about that is servants, and God greatly regulated the treatment of your servants as we studied. Jeremy?
I was going to say in verse 2, some translations say that's at night or at dark, if the break-in happens, that if you slay them, then there's no problem.
Right.
Because really it's an endanger not only to your property, but yourself and your family.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like more of a penalty for that person committing that act.
Sure.
And then it talks about the sun rising up. Then it's supposed to be, I guess, some mercy or...
Yeah, you would have to look at the situation, but with it being daylight, as you said, you're doing it under the cover of night. There's a lot of things you can't see. A lot of things you can't deal with. But a lot of times under the light of day, the circumstances may take on a little bit different twist because now the thief is readily what? And he's identified readily. Whereas at night you have more at stake because usually people are asleep, the family's asleep, you got kids in the house, so on and so forth, okay? So it's very similar maybe to what you would see in the laws today. And so we find he could be sold into servitude, and I cleaned this up a little bit. This spot color didn't come out exactly like I thought it would on the big screen. It looks pretty good on my laptop, but it getting too hot I see on this big screen. So come on. And so we find that this can be regarded as a positive approach to the punishment of criminals. making them pay restitution. Just think about that for a minute. That is kind of a positive way to handle that situation, isn't it? Because, you know, a lot of times, everybody suffers loss involving if you throw them in jail, right? Okay? Who gets what? Really, nobody gets nothing, do they? This right here, they had a grave responsibility that, hey, this thing could come down pretty heavy on me. This can be regarded as a positive approach in the punishment of criminals, putting them to productive restitution and compensating the victims of their theft. These principles are often ignored in the modern administration of justice. And, you know, at one time, we did see things like this go on. Maybe down through the years and down toward the end of a change being made in that thought pattern, I have seen, and I know you have seen people standing out like in front of Walmart or Dollar General or someplace like that, and they'll have this sign on themselves, right? I'm a thief, I stole from this store. Well, that's a form of identification and punishment, really, to stop and make the thieves think about what they've done. And so, you know, myself, I think it's a good idea. But anyway, Jeremy, that's my idea, that's not Bible, okay? All right. Verses 5 through 8. Any of you brethren have a comment or anything on those verses? I know I blowed through it kind of quick, but like I say, we got a whole lot to cover here in this. Okay?
We'll say that God knows what's fair.
Right.
Man might not know, but God knows.
Right.
And He's going to make it be so that what restitution represents
Right.
is of equal value.
Right.
Maybe in possibly.
Right.
Might be a little bit more sometimes in some cases.
Yeah, right. And these are guides. This is giving the judges a way when cases and issues come up that they have a guideline to follow directly from who? God. This is what I'm expecting out of you. You know, we saw a couple of times he mentioned like you were in Egypt. Well, you got to remember that they were under bondage and literal slavery in Egypt, wasn't they? Okay? So anyway, verse 5, if a man shall cause a field or a vineyard to be eaten, and shall put in his beast, and shall feed in another man's field, of the best of his own field, and of the best of his own vineyard, he shall make restitution. So you just couldn't let your animals run free. You couldn't let them graze free. They couldn't just go anywhere they want and go into somebody else's pasture or field or whatever and do damage, okay? And if a fire break out and catch in thorns, so that the stacks of corn or the standing corn or the field be consumed thereof, he that kindleth the fire shall surely make restitution. So what are you saying here? That the person that causes the disturbance or destruction is held what? You could just go out there and build a fire. Because if it got out of hand, then you are to make what? Restitution. So you just can't arbitrarily do these things. If a man shall deliver unto his neighbor money or stuff to keep, and it be stolen out of the man's house, if the thief be found, let him pay double. So if you were to keeping something of somebody's and it was stolen, then the thief is to pay double. If the thief be not found, then the master of the house shall be brought unto the judges to see whether he have put his hands unto his neighbor's goods. Notice he specifically brings the judges back into this. A man was given his goods to someone to hold, to keep. The goods come up missing. The man said they're stolen. Well, maybe the owner of the goods that gave them to the man is saying, I don't know if them goods were stolen. There's something suspicious about this. So what would the judges do? They'd look into it, wouldn't they? Okay? Because, sometimes, unfortunately, people have sticky fingers, don't they? So, anyway, this is what we're dealing with here in 5 through 8. The owner of the animal was responsible for the grazing of his animals. He was obligated to respect his neighbor's property, the grazing land. Thus men are held responsible not only for the harm they do, but also the harm they occasion. even though they might not have purposely designed the damage that ensued. It's kind of like that fire. You go out and build a fire, you may not purposely, maliciously, or had the intent for that fire to get away from you, right? But it did. Well, you're still held accountable for the damage done to others' property. And I think we see that too a lot of times, the way our homeowners insurance and stuff is structured like this. As long as we're in the confines of our property line, no harm, no foul. But if we're working with our own property line and it bleeds over into the neighbor's property line, then what happens? We're held liable, aren't we? We just can't go out there and arbitrarily say, well, I'm going to do this and, go on about my business. He shall make restitution from the best of his own field and the best of his own vineyard. Notice that right there. You couldn't just arbitrarily give whatever. God specifically said, you're going to give the best. Well, if you look at that from an economical standpoint of view, and you're a farmer, and you have this wheat or grain, or you have these grapes, what are you going to get more money for? The prime or the secondary? The prime, right? So you're really suffering a great loss. This is really designed too to be a deterrent from you letting things get out of hand that you control. And even for things that you didn't mean to get out of hand, you're still held accountable for it. And if you look at the restitution principles, they're pretty significant because you got to remember, a lot of times we deal in monetary things, don't we? Well, money, okay, has restitution, right? It's the same thing here. You're going to get hit pretty hard. Because now all you're going to have left of your crop to sell is the second and thirds. And you're not going to get as much for the second and thirds as you do the prime, right? So it's to make people take notice that they have responsibility. He who kindled the fire shall surely make restitution. Restitution was also required in the case of vandalism or foolish negligence, even if one kept the property of another. The Mosaic legal system had a high view of personal responsibility, even with the property of others. And we find that teaching bleeds over to, a lot of this does, in the New Testament. I was doing some research, so I got to thinking, how many passages of Old Testament Scripture bleeds over into the New Testament? And some of the numbers I'm finding, it depends upon how you look at it. Some sources say there's 343 passages of Old Testament Scripture that bleed over into the New Testament, with somewhere around 1,000 allusions back to the Old Testament. And I'm going to get an overhead together and show you some of that. I may even get that on the handout. So I thought it was real interesting about how a lot of these thoughts and principles do bleed over. And we know that 9 of the 10 commandments, the basic commandments that we talk about, have often referred to as the law of Moses, but as you can see, that was only the beginning. That was kind of like the bullet points, Daniel. Here's the detail, okay? You may have a one-page blah, 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 but to support that one-page document, you may have 1,000 pages. Sounds like QS 9000 or TS, doesn't it? Anyway, it's kind of a private joke. He knows what I'm talking about. Anyway, if someone gives you something to hold for them, you are then responsible for it as a faithful steward or manager. This principle also includes what God gives us to manage or steward for Him. So, if you stop and think about it, we have a responsibility for the things that we're given to control, aren't we? Shall surely make restitution. He shall pay double. Restitution was paid according to a predetermined amount or percentage. It was not left to the whim of either the victim or the judge. So they had a guideline here to go by. As Brother Kahn said, as we go over into Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, you're going to find it getting even more finite at what this means, okay? So, this translated to a proper concern for the property of others today. A Christian, if he backs into someone else's car, will certainly have a note and make good the damage. A Christian will have proper insurance guaranteeing they can compensate for someone else's loss. And I thought that was pretty interesting to see that, how some of this is applied in our thought pattern today and the way we do things today. I know I'm running kind of fast, like I say, and you're going to see another transition here in just a little bit. Any of you brethren have any comment on those things, on those thoughts? And I hope I haven't abbreviated it, Jeff, to the point to where we're losing the value of it, but we've spent tons of time already in this, so we got to get to moving. Verses 9 through 13. For all manner of trespass, whether it be for ox, for ass, for sheep, for raiment, or for any manner of lost things, which another challenge to be his, the cause of both parties shall come before the judge, and whom the judge shall condemn, he shall pay double unto his neighbor. Now you've gotten into some conflict. That's mine. No, it's not. It's mine. Well, I gave you that to hold. No, you didn't. I obtained that. And they get into that he say, they say, mine, yours, or whatever. Then where does it go? To the judge, doesn't it? Kind of like our court today. Where would that dispute go? To a judge, wouldn't it? Okay? And so we find that these judges, both parties, and the judges shall, whomever the judges condemn, he shall pay double unto his neighbor. So what this does and tries to do is stopgap pity, panty, that's a word for it. It won't come to me where frivolous. Okay? This is done to stop these frivolous discussions, right? So when you go into that, you better have an understanding and you better have your facts down that, hey, if the judges rule against you, you're going to pay double. You know? So that was put there as a stopgap measure. If you're going to get into those types of frivolous discussions. If a man deliver unto his neighbor an ass or an ox or a sheep or any beast to keep, and it die or be hurt or driven away, no man seeing it, then shall an oath of the Lord be between them both, that he shall put his hand unto his neighbor's goods, and the owner of it shall accept thereof, and he shall not make it good. And if it be stolen from him, he shall make restitution unto the owner. If it be torn in pieces, then let him bring it for witness, and he shall not make good that which was torn. So here we have these laws and regulations coming into being. Any kind of law saying which another claims to be his, in the law of Israel, an owner did not lose ownership simply because the object was lost. If another found the object and then later laid claim to it, with a dispute following, it was to be decided by the judges. An object has been lost, the owner later sees a similar object in possession of his neighbor, and he claims it has his own. The Israelites didn't apparently follow the Anglo-Saxon dictum of finders keepers, okay? You know, you've heard that said a lot, right? Finders keepers, okay? The Israelites didn't follow that. A lost object remains a possession of the original owner who can claim it. And so this is where you would get the judges involved. The cause of both parties shall come before the judges, and whomever the judges condemn shall pay double. If there was a dispute regarding the loss of property, the judges heard evidence, investigated, and decided who was right and who was wrong. The guilty party had to pay double restitution, whether they were accused or the defendant. There was a price for false accusations or a lawsuit, what we call frivolous today. So we find they all had responsibility in this. Any of you brethren have a comment on those verses there? Brother Conn?
I glanced over in Deuteronomy, and it says that if two men have a controversy and they come before the judge, and the judge decides between them, and he finds out the one that's righteous and the one that's wicked. Well, if the wicked be deemed worthy of beating,
Oh, yeah.
he's to lay down before the judges and be beaten with not more
As you get over into this, remember,
You can pay restitution and you can get into some lighter of penalties.
oh, yeah.
You might get into some heavy ones once in a while, and them heavy ones make care beating for you.
Right, right. And that's one thing about this, that's why I keep saying,
That's like it is, when it said that the mother and father sometime might have to take a son before a judge say, hey, this boy's contrary, he
Right.
don't mind us at all.
they couldn't arbitrarily just put him to death.
And sometimes they'll stone them to death.
Right,
Yeah, that's the finality of it
right,
there.
right. It was all laid on the hands of the judges. And these are principles and guidelines, as Brother Kahn just said now. And as we keep repeating, and I want to drive that home because I didn't bleed over into these other books where the law gets even more detailed, okay?
Yeah, it gets tough.
Oh, yeah, it gets, we could spend, like I say, we're not here to teach a law class, we're here to teach the Bible, but we are trying to just paint a picture of some of these regulations. As I say, if you take time and reference a lot of this over into Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy, you're going to find it gets just like a law library, okay? What was that? Oh, if a man deliver to his neighbor a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any animal to keep, and it dies, is hurt, or driven away, no one seeing it, the law consider this situation when something suspicious happens. An animal in the care of another dies, is hurt, or driven away. Yet it happens with no witnesses, no one seeing it. Shall the testimony of the accused be accepted in such cases? Then an oath of the Lord shall be between them both, that he has not put his hand into his neighbor's goods, and the owner of it shall accept that. In such cases, the owner of that animal was obligated to accept the sworn testimony of the accused unless there was evidence that gave reason to doubt the truthfulness of the accused. So, what do we find a lot of times, even today, is one of the key things about when you make accusations. Evidence. I'll tell you a true story. Back when I was, I don't know, I must have been in my early 20s, maybe mid-20s, so that would have been 40-something years ago. Daddy still had was running a few cattle, and we always had a lot of cattle, but he was still running a few because, he was getting older. And anyway, make a long story short, I didn't know cattle rustling still existed, okay? So he come up missing 5 prime steers that was being prepped for the market, okay? All right. They come up missing. Went to the backside of the property line, and the fence had been cut. And you could see where a trailer had backed up to that fence, Jeff. And it was pretty obvious that somebody had loaded up them steers and had stolen them, right? Well, kind of walked on there a little bit, and of course the sheriff came out, Daddy told the story, and this, that, and the other, and they came out again, this, that, and the other. And so just so happens, word through the community was kind of filtering back. Daddy was already suspicious of who stole them, right? Well, when that come back, we went back to the sheriff's office and told the sheriff, and he said, well, Bob, what evidence do you have? Well, Bob, no, what evidence do you have? I hear words, but I don't see evidence. So see, Daniel, knowing who may have done it and having the evidence to prove it is two different things. We know a lot of things, don't we? Our gut tells us, yeah, that's probably what happened. But as far as the law is concerned and the courts are concerned and the judges are concerned, what do we got to have? Evidence. We've got to have evidence. So you couldn't just arbitrarily, as an Israelite, go and file a false claim or a claim against your brother. At times you had to have the evidence to show that, what you're saying is true. Okay, here we go. He shall bring in his evidence. Production of the carcass would show that while the shepherd could not prevent the kill, he was alert enough to stop the devouring prey. So that's evidence, okay, of what happened to that animal. The animal is still here and intact, so what he's saying is true, and he did all he could to prevent the injury or death of that animal, okay? The owner of it shall accept that. Though the owner of the animal suffered loss, he was not allowed to compensate the loss by accusing and winning damages against an innocent party. He had to accept the outcome even though justice left him uncompensated. And that's just the old verbiage of sometimes things are judged, it just happens, doesn't it? Really no fault to anybody. It's just a part of it, you know, a part of it. So we find that those laws were in place. Do you see how this is getting more stringent and more tighter? And it's going to get more stringent and more tighter as these applications are made. One of the things that you got to remember, guess where the children of Israel are not? They're not in the land of Canaan. Right now, you know, some of this they're wondering, well, we're out here in the desert just wandering around. What is all this got to do with anything? But when they hit the land of Canaan, that's where we get over into those other books, Brother Con, it's really going to tighten up. This was just a prelude, if you will, or a thought at what was coming. Even though we know a lot of this they did apply into camp and things of that nature, but you're going to see as the herds grew and that kind of thing, and they had property and they had land and their inheritances and things like that, you're going to have laws and rules to regulate all that. Okay? Let's see, verses 14 through 27. If a man borrow aught of his neighbor, and it be hurt or die, the owner thereof, being not with it, he shall surely make it good. Now, you wasn't around when that happened. You're still responsible. There was nothing you could have done to have prevented it or stopped it because you wasn't there. Well, this is a different scenario than the other ones if you were there and trying to prevent the accident or injury to take place. Now, you wasn't there and it takes place. Well, you're held responsible for that, okay? But if the owner thereof be with it, he shall not make it good. If it be a hired thing, it came for his hire. And if a man entice a maid, I'll go ahead and read through this. We're probably not going to get through all of it. And if a man entice a maid that is not betrothed, and lie to her, he shall surely endow her to be his wife. If her father utterly refuse to give her unto him, he shall pay money according to the dowry of virgins. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. You know, some of these are just one-liners. It's pretty self-explanatory. Whosoever lieth with a beast shall surely be put to death. He that sacrificed unto any god save unto the Lord, he shall utterly be destroyed. Thou shalt neither vex a stranger nor oppress him, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. There we are again. It kind of brings them up. You remember how your situation was in Egypt? You're not to treat other people like that because you see the impact of what that does. You shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. If thou afflict them in any wise, and they cry at all unto me, I will surely hear their cry. And my wrath shall wax hot, and I will kill you with the sword. And your wife shall be widows, and your children fatherless. Boy, God thought a lot about putting unwarranted and undue afflictions on people, didn't he? Especially widows and children and things of that nature. I mean, that's just pretty bold and to the point, isn't it? If thou lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not be to him as an usurer or money lender, neither shalt thou lay upon him usury. You know, that would be lending money and applying the principles of interest and things of that nature, okay? Notice what it says that the people that are poor, you know, God had a special place for the poor in his plan, okay? If thou at all take thy neighbor's raiment to pledge, let's say the man did have something that, and we've seen this before, sometimes people, don't have anything, and so money was given unto them to help them, but then sometimes people say, well, wait a minute, I got this I can pledge unto you as security, right? Now, here again, you got to look at what's going on and the situation is at hand. So you could take something as a pledge in this. But notice what it says here, though, about it. If thou at all take thy neighbor's raiment to pledge, thou shalt deliver it unto him for the sun, that the sun goeth down, that this is his covering only. It is his raiment for his skin, wherein shall he sleep. And it shall come to pass when he crieth unto me that I will hear, for I am gracious. So you couldn't just arbitrarily hold that, okay? It was specifically regulated, okay? That would have to be returned for Sunday. So Jeremy, there's some stringent things here about dealing with the poor and dealing with poor people that want to give you a pledge. Because, you know, sometimes people want to be helpful in what they're doing, okay? They don't want to just arbitrarily take from someone else. So we see this regulated in the law. I'm going to have to. Verses 14 and 15, if a man borrow anything from his neighbor, the principles of responsibility and restitution also apply to borrowing and lending. Verses 16 and 17, if the man who took advantage of the woman was considered a completely unacceptable husband by the father of the wronged woman, then that man had to pay the dowry without receiving a bride. This was a strong incentive against taking advantage of young women, the remedy for premarital sex. So this is a whole lesson within itself, okay? Women were highly respected and regarded by God. You just couldn't arbitrarily take advantage of them, okay? And if you did, and you were found to be unfit for her, then when she was released, you had to pay a dowry. And Jeff, that could be quite substantial. You know, I've seen various amounts in studies and stuff like that. A lot of times it depends upon what she was bringing to the plate, and then he obtained those goods, and then it was decided it didn't work out. I'll just say it that way. When he released her, it could get very expensive. Very expensive. Okay? And this is some of the reasons why it was done. Like I said, that's a lesson within itself. Verses 18 through 20, there's three capital crimes mentioned here. You shall not permit a sorcerer to live. Whosoever lies with an animal shall surely be put to death. He who sacrifices to any god except to the Lord only, he shall be utterly destroyed. Eric, I don't know how to paraphrase that. That's just pretty plain, isn't it? Brother Herbert Keeper say that's just plain old USA English, you know? I don't know. What do you say about that? Pretty to the point, isn't it? Verse 21, compassion for the stranger. You shall neither mistreat a stranger nor oppress him, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. Remember how you were treated in the land of Egypt? You were a stranger in that land. Look at how they mistreated you and abused you. You don't want to do that to your fellow man. You've already had experience with how that works and what happens. Okay? Verses 22 through 24, compassion for the weak and vulnerable. You shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. If you afflict them in any way, and they cry out to me, watch this. I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath will become hot, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives shall be widows, and your children fathers. Boy, God has strong regulations about the weak and vulnerable, didn't he? We see today that's a problem in it. And it has been a problem in society, not only today, but unfortunately, who is preyed upon a lot in our society? The weak and the vulnerable. You know, I'm going to just say this as a side note. A lot of times telephone calls are made during the day, and most of the people at home are elderly, and a lot of times the elderly people don't necessarily understand what is going on with these things, and they wind up paying the $39.95. don't even know what they bought. Okay? I know of a case personal where that happened to an elderly person. They wound up buying internet service and don't even own a computer and didn't know what one was. That's what it's talking about, preying on the vulnerable and the weak. God didn't tolerate that. And he does not tolerate that. Well, I hear them coming. I think I'm gonna stop right there and ring the bus. I think they've already broke. So we'll stop right there, and that's where we'll pick up next week. Almost made it through it, Jim. We didn't spend weeks there, Jeremy. But I hope it's enough to where we can see God's laws and regulations and how they apply.